Okay, so have you ever come across a book that tries to explain, well, everything? The entire history of humanity packed into less than 500 pages? That's what we're talking about today. Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens. This book didn't just sell well, it literally exploded onto the scene, and it's left millions of people totally inspired, while leaving a whole lot of others, well, pretty shaken up.
So before we get into the whole controversy, you've got to understand just how big of a deal this book is. I mean, we're not talking about some dusty old history book here. For millions of people, reading Sapiens completely changed the way they look at, well, everything.
And when I say big, I mean big. Get this, over 27.5 million copies sold. It's been translated into 60 different languages, so it's basically everywhere. For a book about ancient history, that's just unheard of.
But it's not just about the sales numbers, right? The list of people who recommended it is just insane. You've got Barack Obama, Bill Gates, even Captain America himself, Chris Evans. These are people who, when they say, read this, a whole lot of people listen. And they were all saying, you have to read Sapiens.
Okay, so with all that hype, you have to ask, what's going on here? There's a question from one reviewer that I think really cuts right to the heart of why this book is so polarizing.
Yeah, that is a really heavy question, isn't it? It tells you that the ideas in Sapiens aren't just fun facts about the past. We're talking about ideas so powerful, they could actually shake what a person believes to their very core. So, what is this big, explosive idea?
All right, so Harari's whole argument, the entire book, really boils down to one single massive idea. It's the secret sauce, as he sees it, that took us, Homo sapiens, from being just another ape in the pack to, well, the rulers of the entire planet.
He gives it a name, an imagined order. And what does that mean? It's our unique human ability to just make stuff up and then believe in it together as a massive group. Think about it. Nations, laws, money, even the idea of human rights. You can't touch them, you can't see them, they're not physically real. They only exist because we all agree to tell ourselves the same story about them.
Money is maybe the best example he gives. A dollar bill? It's just a piece of paper with some ink on it. So why does it have any power? Only because billions of us, complete strangers, all collectively agree to believe in the story of its value. It's the most successful story ever told.
And this is where we really see the difference between us and other animals. A chimp can shout, "Hey, watch out, there's a lion." That's useful, sure. But a human can say, "The lion, that is the guardian spirit of our tribe." And that story, that little piece of fiction, changes everything. It creates a shared identity, a shared reality that allows millions of people to cooperate in a way no other animal on Earth can.
Now, this idea is obviously super compelling, right? It captivated millions. But it definitely has not convinced everyone. In fact, a lot of scientists, anthropologists, and historians are pushing back, and they're pushing back hard. Their argument? That Harari's grand sweeping story is built on some seriously shaky foundations.
And yeah, the academic world has not been shy with its criticism. One anthropologist, Christopher Hallpike, basically called it infotainment. He said it's more like a wild ride of speculation than a real, serious contribution to our knowledge.
Another critic, science journalist Charles C. Mann, was even more brutal. He said reading it felt like listening to a dorm room bull session. Ouch. And that really gets to the main complaint, that Harari makes these huge, dramatic claims without much, actual evidence to back them up. It's what some call fact-free storytelling. A perfect example of this is what he calls the tree of knowledge mutation. So Harari's theory is that our amazing brains are the result of some random genetic accident that happened around 70,000 years ago. He even admits, hey, we're not totally sure about this. But then he goes on to say it was pure chance. For his critics, that's just not good enough. That's not science. That's just a convenient story that fits his narrative.
And this whole clash, this tension between a really compelling story and what the scientific evidence actually says, it all comes to a boiling point when we get to one of the most powerful imagined orders of all time: religion.
So Harari lays out this really neat, clean progression for how religion developed. He basically says it evolved for a practical reason, to get bigger and bigger groups of people to work together. So you start with animism for small hunter-gatherer bands. Then you get polytheism for larger kingdoms. And finally, you get monotheism to run massive global empires. See? A nice, simple ladder.
But here's the thing.
critics are quick to point out that there's actual evidence that completely messes up this tidy little model. For example, you have the Santal people in India. Their own history, their oral traditions, say they started out as monotheists. They believed in one God. And it was only later that they fell into animism and worshipping spirits. That's the complete opposite of Harari's ladder.
Evidence like this suggests that the real story of religion is way more complicated. It's not a simple one-way street. It's messy, it's diverse, it goes in all sorts of directions. And that's exactly what critics say Harari's theory just glosses right over.
Okay, so you might be thinking, why does this even matter? Who cares if some best-selling author simplifies a few things to tell a good story? Well, it matters because if you take Harari's worldview all the way to its logical conclusion, you end up in a really uncomfortable, even unsettling place, especially when it comes to our world today.
And this right here, this might be the most radical, most controversial quote in the entire book. He says there are no gods, no nations, no human rights, no justice outside of our collective imagination. Just think about that for a second. If he's right, then all the things we value most, justice, freedom, equality, they aren't real objective truths. They're just powerful stories we've all agreed to believe in.
He even drives this point home by doing a little translation exercise with the U.S. Declaration of Independence. He takes its famous lines and rewrites them from what he calls a purely biological perspective. So, created equal, that becomes evolved differently. Unalienable rights, those become mutable characteristics. In his view, from a cold, hard biological standpoint, our most cherished ideals are just fictions.
And what's wild is that Harari doesn't even back away from how dangerous this sounds. He flat out says these fictions, these imagined orders, are basically necessary illusions. They're what stops society from completely falling apart. A belief in human rights might not be true in a scientific sense, but he argues it's absolutely essential to keep civilization from collapsing.
And that brings us to the huge central conflict at the heart of Sapiens, doesn't it? On one hand, the book shows us the unbelievable power of our shared stories to build entire civilizations. But on the other hand, it leaves us staring at a pretty terrifying question. If the stories holding our world together, things like equality and human rights, are just useful fictions, what happens if we all stop believing in them? And there is no easy answer to that.